Martin, Oklahoma, Jane Doe, identified as Francine Frost. Francine Frost was a quiet and unassuming woman who lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She dated Malcolm Frost for 6 months, becoming pregnant not long after their marriage. She would give birth to 2 daughters named Vicky and Karen. But life wasn't smooth for Francine. Her first child, Vicky, would become a rebellious teen, leaving home at a young age to travel to Kansas. The two unfortunately became estranged, although thankfully time would heal all wounds. Vicky got pregnant and missed her mother. Francine, for her part, was filled with love for her new grandson, Corey, and then things fell apart all over again. Her father called to inquire if she'd spoken to her mother, frantic because Francine was missing. She had gone shopping that day, and after searching, they found her car in the Skaggs Alpha Beta parking lot. She was reported missing, and the news picked up their plea for her safe return. 2 years would pass before an anonymous tip on New Year's Day in 1983 led to Francine's body, 60 miles away from where her car was found that day. However, despite the similarities and close proximity, it appears no one even bothered to try to match her to the missing persons report. The state simply buried the body as Jane Doe. There's no indication they searched for her name or who the person was who took her life. It took 29 years for her grandson Corey, now an adult himself, to begin digging for answers. Turns out his grandmother had been 60 miles away all that time. Eventually, it was Corey who found a link to an unidentified woman, buried as Martin, Oklahoma, Jane Doe. The listing for her mentioned prairie jean skirts. When Corey took it to his mother, she was stunned. The clothes told Vicky it was her mother. At the request of her family, her DNA was extracted and sent to the University of North Texas in 2015. It would take until August 8, 2016. She was so close for 33 years and her family had no idea. Even then, the police didn't share much of anything. Her daughter would say they learned of the gunshot wounds her mother suffered by looking through old newspaper articles from when her mother was originally found. The lack of help offered by the police infuriated her family, and as a result, they worked with legislators to pass Francine's law. Now, if 30 days have passed and they are not found, their information must be sent to the NamUs system. Francine's grandson would say, "The murder is horrifying, but the missing person is worse because you don't know. If you have information on this disappearance, please contact the Tulsa Police Department or the Muskogee County District Attorney's Office." Francine Frost went unidentified for 33 years. The Griffith Park Jane Doe, identified as Cheryl Ann McMillan. Cheryl Ann McMillan was just 21 when she was found unresponsive in a Los Angeles, California park in 1968 due to an overdose. She was wearing a red and white polka-dotted bikini, a tan overcoat, and dark sandals. She also had a gold wedding ring that had the inscription CB to EJ 9420. It was a lucky break when this was finally solved, as Cheryl's body was cremated after it was found and there was no way to extract DNA. This one came about thanks not to the police or family, but rather the result of an amateur online sleuth, especially given that the forensic identification would have been impossible. It's pretty amazing they figured out who she was. Cheryl Ann's family and friends were able to confirm it based on the jewelry. It was known at the time she used the name Cheryl Miller. Turns out that was not her name. Miller was the name of a man she'd been dating around that time. Cheryl had called her cousin to give her a heads up that she was unable to show up on that day for a fitting for her cousin Ellen's wedding. It was surprising because she was to be the maid of honor, but Cheryl promised she would be there for the wedding itself, except that she wouldn't. In fact, it was the last time anyone would speak to her again, and her family spent the next 50 years looking for her. Cheryl graduated from high school in 1964 in Detroit. She then lived in Florida for a short time before moving to Los Angeles. Her family was pretty sure her involvement in the drug trade had caught up to her, and it did, but not quite the way they envisioned. Cheryl had confided in her cousin that she was making money transporting drugs from Guadalajara, Mexico, to Baja, California. It was that confession that led her family to suspect she was killed or was perhaps in a Mexican jail. They never suspected the truth at all. In fact, what happened was that she was found slumped over a picnic table in Griffith Park in Hollywood on June 8, 1968. Dying of a morphine overdose at 21, it was the 1960s and drug culture was rampant, especially with those in her age group. Cheryl was living what was described as the ultimate boho lifestyle at the time. Authorities at the time had traced the Griffith Park Jane Doe to the Hollywood Motel in Studio City. They believed her name was that of Cheryl Miller, but that was never recorded in the public record. So this important clue was never given to her family. Without this important clue, they likely never would have figured out who she was. Instead, she was recorded as Jane Doe number 18 by the LA Coroner's Office. Carl Koppelman found her photo on a coroner's website in 2010 and did the recreation that you see here. They knew her hair had been bleached blonde, but they weren't even sure what her real hair color was. He shared the photo with a group on Web Sleuths, where he was the moderator. A different amateur genealogist, acting as an amateur sleuth, caught the wedding ring's inscription and found herself poring over genealogical records, trying to find a couple whose initials matched that and that date on the ring. It took 4 weeks, but she did it. She identified Edna Lydia J., who married Charles J. Bush in Detroit on September 4th, 1920. Her efforts paid off in a huge way. Manzo, who was barely in grade school when his sister vanished, admitted that until then he never even considered she could be anything other than alive, living her life somewhere without her family. They had been searching for her, but never once had they looked at or even considered she could be a Jane Doe. He found himself touched that even in the haze of drug use, she never considered pawning their grandmother's ring to buy drugs. Something that took on even more meaning when they realized it was the one thing that led to her name being restored 50 years later. He then said, "She wasn't just another heroin addict found in the park. She was my sister." That sentiment was echoed by her cousin, whose wedding in June of 1968 took place without Cheryl taking her rightful place in the wedding party. Her cousin offered a final word as to who Cheryl was. A friendly girl with a literal flair for drama who led her on teenage adventures to Santa Cruz and beyond. She'd always hoped that her cousin would once again find her. She said she was like a sister to her. Cheryl Ann McMillan went unidentified for 48 years. The Oakland County Jane Doe, identified as Darlene Rene Mckenzie. Darlene Mckenzie was just 15 when she left home in Detroit, Michigan, on a sunny day in June of 1975. She wasn't just a carefree teen either, she was already a mother. Her daughter had recently turned 1, and she had been living with her stepfather and her mother, but that day they'd gotten into a huge argument. Her parents expected she'd blow off some steam and come back home. That didn't happen. Her mother finally went door to door, desperately trying to find someone who'd seen Darlene, but if anyone had, nobody admitted it. In the meantime, workers found her near Interstate 696 on June 10th, about a half hour away from Detroit. Darlene's body was processed by the Oakland County Sheriff's Office, eventually ruling it a homicide by strangulation, but they were unable to find any clues to her identity. That is, until 40 years had passed, and the Farmington Hills cold case detectives began investigating again. They went all over the evidence in this case and submitted Darlene's DNA to NamUs, which is the main clearinghouse for all DNA in the United States in regard to missing persons. The officers also reached out to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children to see if the case matched any missing person reports. Now, in a case like this, I'll admit I'm confused. It makes zero sense why the department didn't try to match her to missing person reports then. She was found pretty close to where she went missing. Now, it's possible she wasn't reported officially missing to the police. The Detroit police don't deny that any report was ever made. They just say they don't have it any longer. Although, if that's the case, it's Farmington who caused 40 years of pain thanks to inaction, not Detroit. The original DNA was inconclusive, likely due to the age of the sample. In some of these older cases, they have to resort to different procedures to get usable DNA. But luckily, all kinds of innovative things have happened. The second sample got a hit right away. Unknown to the Farmington Hills Police Department, the Detroit police were looking into their missing persons case at the same time. Caroline Mckenzie Ransom was in her 40s, and she'd been looking for her mother all of her life. She asked the department to look into her mother's 1975 disappearance, and they agreed. She also provided a sample for comparison. Once her sample was uploaded, a match was made. Darlene Rene Mckenzie once again had her name. I'm sure people are sick of me lecturing, but in case someone new is watching, the best thing you can do if you're looking for a loved one is submit your DNA to NamUs. This is a separate database from CODIS, and it doesn't involve any criminal searches. It's the very first search that's done if DNA is run on a cold Doe case. Especially given so many cases are stopped at this search, it's important to have it in that database. Darlene's daughter, Carlita, was interviewed and said, "I truly believe that it was someone that got close to her. She doesn't believe it was a stranger-on-stranger crime." She would add at the end, "You have not gotten away with it. It's just a matter of time." Darlene's mother said Darlene liked to style hair. She was into fashion and dancing. She was attending the Detroit Job Corps and was hoping to find a job and be able to support her young daughter. If anyone has any idea as to Darlene's movements in 1975, please call the number on your screen. Darlene Rene Mckenzie went unidentified for 41 years. She was found 27 miles away from where she went missing. That's it for today. Thanks, everybody. Take care of yourselves and each other.